June 14th, 1959. Edwards Air Force Base, California. Dawn. The sun isn't up yet, but the desert is already breathing heat. A thin blue edge of morning light slides across the dry lake bed, revealing a shape that looks too small, too simple, too unimpressive to matter. At least to the generals who ordered it hidden under a canvas tarp. Northrop test pilot Lou Nelson walks toward it, boots crunching over the salt-crusted ground. You can hear the distant rumble of an F-100 climbing out on afterburner, the sound of the real Air Force, the one obsessed with bigger wings, bigger engines, bigger budgets. And yet, Nelson's steps go toward something half its size, barely taller than he is, with narrow wings and a needle nose that looks like it had been sharpened for cutting through the jungle canopy. No one calls it by its designation yet. Internally, engineers whisper, the low-altitude knife. A jet designed not for high-altitude duels, not for supersonic prestige, but for one brutal job: survive a treetop war. Nelson reaches the tarp's edge, grabs the cord, and pulls. Canvas slides away, dust rising. The prototype gleams. Polished aluminum, narrow landing gear, twin tiny intakes, and a cockpit bubble that promises visibility in every direction. It is the culmination of months of sketches passed between engineers at Northrop's Hawthorne plant, many of them veterans of World War II who hated the Pentagon's idea that future wars would be fought only by high-flying interceptors. This jet is their rebellion. It was built for the kind of battlefield planners don't want to imagine. Hot, wet valleys filled with monsoon rain, trees scraping the belly of an aircraft, villages hidden beneath layered green shadows, and enemy troops moving like ghosts. A place where radar is useless, altitude is suicide, and survival depends on seeing first, firing first, and disappearing before a single muzzle flash reaches the sky. Nelson climbs the ladder. Engineers watch him. Young men with sleeves rolled up, clipboards in hand, wondering if this morning will be the one where the Air Force finally sees what they see. A cheap, lethal, maneuverable strike fighter that doesn't need fancy runways or massive budgets. Visibility is good, Nelson calls from the cockpit. It's like sitting in a greenhouse with wings. One of the engineers laughs. Hans Koch, a structural specialist who helped design the jet's frame to bend, not break, under violent low-level turns. Another, Robert Sanderson, checks the twin-engine mountings. They weren't powerful. No brass-button Pentagon general would ever be impressed by their thrust numbers, but they were reliable. The entire jet could fly off a dirt strip and still climb out clean. A radio crackles nearby. Voices, authority, the kind that kills programs. A sedan approaches, olive drab, windows down, uniforms visible inside. Nelson tightens his harness. "They're early," he mutters. The sedan brakes hard on the lake bed. A colonel steps out, face stiff, collar spotless. This is Colonel McConnell, a procurement officer who never liked Northrop's idea of small fighters. Too cheap, too practical, too hard to justify in multi-million-dollar budgets. "Gentlemen," he says, taking slow steps toward the prototype, "I thought I gave orders to suspend this demonstration." Sanderson swallows. "Sir, we had already prepped the aircraft for—" McConnell slices the air with his hand. "There will be no test flights today." Nelson meets his eye through the canopy. Behind the colonel, the desert wind whips the tarp across the sand like a defeated flag. The engineers stand frozen, the way men look when they can feel their work being erased in real time. McConnell circles the jet. "It's too small. It carries too little. It can't keep up with our heavier platforms. And frankly, no theater exists today where the United States Air Force needs such a toy." He steps away, dust swirling around polished black shoes. But the engineers know something he doesn't. Reports are coming in from a place most Americans have barely heard of, a stretch of jungle-stained terrain on the other side of the world where French units had vanished under the trees. A place where U.S. advisors are beginning to circle. Vietnam. McConnell taps the aircraft's nose with 2 fingers. "Cancel the program immediately." He turns and walks away, not waiting for an answer. Nelson exhales slowly. He hasn't even started the engines, but the fight for the aircraft's life is already lost. Unless, and the engineers exchange glances, they can prove today that the world is changing faster than the Air Force can understand. Sanderson leans toward Nelson. "If we fly it now," he whispers, "we fly it without permission." Nelson glances at the rising sun. Heat rolling across the desert. The kind of heat that makes a man choose whether to obey orders or history. He reaches for the starter switch. The prototype shudders. Twin engines spool up with a rising metallic whine. Faint at first, then louder, then unmistakable. Across the lake bed, the colonel turns, shocked. The jungle jet is waking up. The engines settle into a tight, eager hum, not the thunderous roar of a Phantom or a Super Saber, but the kind of controlled, predatory whine that sounds like it belongs close to the ground. Nelson feels the vibration through the rudder pedals, through the seat, through the ribbed aluminum skin of a jet built not for prestige but for survival. Sanderson steps back, hands raised, face pale. He knows exactly what this means. The colonel does too. "Cut the engine!" McConnell shouts, his voice nearly lost in the rise of turbine RPM. This is an unauthorized... Nelson doesn't hear the rest, or maybe he chooses not to. He checks oil pressure, fuel flow, EGT. Everything holds steady. The canopy seals with a click, locking him into the quiet bubble of the cockpit. Inside, the world feels smaller, just dials, glass, and the desert stretching ahead like a blank canvas begging for a signature. "Lou," Coke calls out from the ground, cupping his hands around his mouth. "You don't have to do this." But Nelson's already throttling forward. The prototype begins to roll. The first 50 feet feel like mutiny. The next 100 feel like liberation. Dust kicks up behind the wheels, forming two tan comets trailing the aircraft as it accelerates across the dry lake bed. The jet weighs almost nothing compared to the Air Force's heavy fighters, and it responds instantly. No lag, no delay, no wrestling the stick. It moves like it's thinking ahead of him. The colonel's shouting fades. The engineers' faces blur into streaks of hope and fear. At 90 knots, the nose begins to lift on its own. At 110, it's airborne. The aircraft rises cleanly, leaving the ground behind with the casual ease of a paper glider, except every part of it is engineered for a battlefield no general wants to admit is coming. Nelson retracts the gear. The desert drops away. For a moment he's stunned. He knew it would fly, but he didn't expect this. It turns like a swallow. The controls are whisper light. A fingertip is enough to bank, a breath is enough to level. He pushes it down to 50 feet above the ground, skimming the sand at a velocity that would snap the wings off a larger, heavier jet. This is what the aircraft was built for, not the open sky, but the subtle, violent chaos of the treetops. Nelson imagines the terrain the engineers obsessed over: mangrove valleys, flooded rice paddies, brush that grows into walls, canopy so thick it erases the sun. The Pentagon sees these places as theoretical. The engineers know better. He dips the nose, pulls up, carves a tight turn that would rip a Phantom apart. The prototype doesn't complain. It rejoices. He keys the radio. "To ground. Aircraft is performing within calculated tolerance, handling excellent, stability above expectation." All he hears back is static, until a voice cracks through, tense and breathless. "Nelson, this is Coke. Land immediately. They're moving to shut down the program altogether, today." Nelson glances east, where the horizon is no longer empty. A second aircraft approaches, a T-33 trainer with 2 officers inside, undoubtedly dispatched to intercept him. The sun glints off its canopy like a warning. He levels out, pressing the prototype deeper toward the desert floor. "Lou," the colonel's voice cuts through the radio now, brittle with rage. "You will return to base at once. This is not a test flight. This is insubordination." Nelson doesn't answer. He's too focused on what the aircraft is showing him, a truth the colonel refuses to see. A war's coming, one fought at treetop height, where a big jet dies the moment it slows down and where a small, nimble machine like this becomes lethal. The T-33 closes behind him, trying to force him upward. Nelson keeps low, skimming the surface. He feels a kind of wild clarity. If the Air Force won't authorize the test, then the desert will. He nudges the throttle. The prototype surges. The T-33 can't follow him this low. It risks swallowing sand, blowing a compressor, or worse. Nelson watches it fall back, forced to climb. He smiles despite himself. He banks left, racing along the cracked earth. The engineers on the ground watch with their hearts in their throats. And then, a sound from the turbine. Not a failure, not a stall, something else. A vibration, a warning. He checks the gauges, fuel pressure dipping. The engine starves for a second, coughs, then recovers. The prototype is too new, too raw, too unfinished. It needs more time, more tests, more support than the colonel will ever allow. "Lou," Coke says again, softer this time, "please, bring it home. If you break it now, they'll never build another." Nelson exhales. The desert ahead seems endless. Vietnam seems impossibly far away. But the jet, their jet, has proven its point. He banks gently, returning toward the lake bed. On the ground, military police vehicles are already gathering. As he descends, Nelson feels the weight of history tightening like a noose. This aircraft could change a war that hasn't started yet, but only if it survives the next 10 minutes. Nelson keeps the prototype low as he approaches the lake bed, lining up with a strip of flattened sand that barely counts as a runway. The MPs are fanned out near the hangars, lights flashing even in daylight, engines idling like wolves waiting for a wounded deer to fall. He lowers the landing gear. 3 green lights flicker on. Good enough. The aircraft floats over the threshold, sinks, and kisses the ground with a softness that surprises even him. Dust billows. The nose tracks straight. When the wheels settle fully into the surface, Nelson eases the throttle back until the engines spool down into a calm, almost apologetic whine. He taxis toward the hangar. The colonel is already marching toward the aircraft, jaw locked, face flushed red under the harsh morning sun. Nelson opens the canopy. Heat rushes in. He's barely unstrapped when McConnell's voice booms. "You had no authorization to take that aircraft into the air." Nelson pulls off his helmet. "With respect, sir, the aircraft is stable, responsive, and it is canceled." The colonel's shadow cuts across the cockpit like a guillotine. "Effective immediately, no further tests, no further funding." Behind him, the engineers stand in a ragged line. Coke's eyes flick between Nelson and the colonel, trying to calculate if there's anything left to salvage. Nelson climbs down the ladder. "Sir, this plane is needed, not today maybe, but soon. There are reports coming out of Southeast Asia." McConnell snaps. "Reports?" He steps in close, voice low but venomous. "Lieutenant, the United States Air Force does not fight in jungles. Our doctrine is built on altitude, speed, and strategic reach. This toy cannot compete with the threats of the future. Russia, China, nuclear bombers. Do you think the Air Force will waste time on a bush plane with delusions of grandeur?" Coke flinches like he's been struck. Sanderson tries to speak. "Colonel, the design is dead," McConnell says. "And if any of you continue work on it, your careers will be as well." The MPs step forward, not to arrest anyone, just to make the threat real. Nelson looks at the prototype. The sun reflects off its canopy, bright enough to sting his eyes. It seems smaller now, lonelier, like a bird with clipped wings listening to a predator declare that flight is forbidden. "Sir," Nelson says quietly, "this aircraft can operate from roads, dirt fields, clearings." "That is exactly the problem," the colonel says. "We don't fight wars where runways don't exist." But a war is already forming in a place where runways barely matter, a place where helicopters, advisors, and strange acronyms, MAG, CIDG, ARVN, are beginning to populate daily intelligence briefs. A war that is still unofficial, still quiet, still distant enough for generals to ignore. For now, the colonel turns to the MPs. "Cover the aircraft, remove all test personnel from the program, effective immediately." Canvas is dragged over the prototype like a funeral shroud. The engines cool with a ticking, metallic rhythm that sounds like a heartbeat fading into silence. Nelson backs away. Coke and Sanderson stand beside him, both staring at the tarp in disbelief. "We'll never get the data from this flight," Coke whispers. "They won't even read your notes." Nelson clenches his helmet under his arm. "They don't understand what's coming." Sanderson shakes his head, or they don't want to. The colonel's sedan pulls away in a cloud of dust. The MPs follow. The base returns to its usual rhythm. F-100s taking off with explosions of afterburner, the thunderous parade of the Air Force's preferred weapons. But the little jungle fighter sits alone, mute, invisible, suffocating under the weight of a decision made to protect careers rather than soldiers. Hours later, when the engineers are quietly escorted off the project, Nelson passes by the hangar one last time. He stops. Someone has hung another tarp over the first, a thick, heavy canvas stamped in red letters. Program terminated. Do not remove. He stares at the warning, at the silhouette beneath it. He knows this isn't just the end of a test. It's the end of a philosophy, the belief that cheap, simple aircraft can win real wars, that small ideas can compete with big egos. But history has a strange sense of humor. 3 years later, the same generals who dismissed jungle warfare will watch the headlines: Vietnam, escalation, advisors overwhelmed, terrain impossible, jets too big, too fast, too blind for the canopy below. And somewhere in a Northrop storage vault, the blueprints of the buried prototype will gather dust until a team revives the design, refines it, renames it N-156, F-5A, Skoshi Tiger. A ghost resurrected, a second chance born from the ashes of the first betrayal. But before that rebirth, the original prototype has to die completely. And its death begins now. August 24th, 1963. The Pentagon, Sub-Level Planning Room 3A. The walls vibrate with the hum of cold air conditioning, fighting a summer heat the building was never designed for. Inside a cramped conference room, a half-dozen officers lean over a spread of maps, green, tangled, hostile maps, stamped with one word that now dominates every briefing: Vietnam. The lights are dim. Cigarette smoke curls toward the ceiling. A projector clicks softly, showing grainy reconnaissance photos of jungle broken only by narrow dirt roads and shadowed river networks. To an untrained eye, it looks like meaningless green chaos. To the men in the room, it looks like a death sentence for any pilot daring to fly low. Colonel Robert Buckner, a logistics officer with 20 years of service, taps the map with a pencil. "Sir, our heavy fighters can't maneuver in this terrain. The F-100, the F-105, they overshoot every target, too fast for close support, too fragile for rough fields." Across the table, General Harold Minton, silver-haired and exhausted, rubs his temples. He hasn't slept properly in days. The situation reports coming out of the Mekong Delta read like warnings written by men drowning under jungle humidity. "ARVN units need air support they can rely on," Buckner continues. "But these jungles, they're eating our doctrine alive." A major from Tactical Air Command steps forward with a folder. He places it on the table like a secret no one is supposed to touch. "Sir, there is an alternative." The general frowns. "Another helicopter proposal?" "No, sir." The major opens the folder. Inside, a blueprint. Compact, twin engines, narrow wings, rugged airframe. A fighter that looks nothing like the sleek jets dominating the runways of the modern USAF. Buckner leans in. "Is that—" The major nods. "Northrop's old N-156 low-altitude strike prototype. Cancelled in '59. Minton sits up straighter. "No, that program was terminated." "Yes, sir. Officially." The major slides a document across the table. "Unofficially, the engineers submitted a revised design 2 years ago. Cheaper engines, improved stress tolerances, capable of operating from 10 different terrain types, all ignored." The general's voice hardens. "We don't resurrect dead programs." "Sir," Buckner says quietly, "Vietnam is resurrecting them for us." The projector changes slides. A convoy ambushed on a jungle road. ARVN patrols calling for air support that arrives too late or too fast. U.S. advisors pinned under tree canopy so thick even helicopters hesitate to descend. "Speed doesn't help if you can't see the target," Buckner says. "Altitude doesn't matter if the jungle erases your angles. The French learned this the hard way. Now we are learning it." The general looks at the blueprint again. It is the same aircraft Nelson flew over the desert, except cleaner, more refined, and with a new proposed name scribbled on the side. Light Strike Fighter, Tropical Variant. Stillborn innovation, but the need has returned. Minton exhales. "What does Northrop say?" "They're eager," the major replies. "They've been sitting on this for years. They knew the jungle war was coming." The general studies the blueprint. No swept wings, no flashy avionics, nothing to impress Congress, just practicality, ruggedness, precision, the very things the Air Force once dismissed. "Cost per unit?" he asks. Less than a quarter of an F-105, the major says. Minton frowns. The chairman won't like that. Cheap jets don't win budget battles, but soldiers don't fight in budget hearings. They fight in places like Kontum, Pleiku, the Iron Triangle, places where small, durable aircraft might actually save lives. He taps the blueprint. How long to field a test squadron? Buckner answers. 6 to 10 months, sir. The general stares at the table, at the jungle photos, at the reports, at the creeping realization that an entire decade of fighter doctrine may have been wrong. Finally, he says, set up a meeting with Northrop. The room exhales, but then, footsteps. The door opens. A new officer enters, delivering a sealed document marked Political Priority. Immediate action required. The general breaks the seal. Inside, congressional pressure to support major procurement of heavy fighters, deals already negotiated, funds already allocated, public expectations set, politicians expecting factories to keep running. He closes the folder slowly. The room waits. Gentlemen, he says at last, the N-156 will not be revived. A stunned silence. Buckner stiffens. Sir. The secretary believes lightweight fighters send the wrong message, Minton says. They imply our strategy is flawed, that the war isn't under control. He pushes the blueprint away. Northrop's low-altitude fighter remains canceled. The folder closes with a soft, lethal thud. But not all ideas die when the Pentagon tells them to. Some become rumors, then whispers, then pressure, then loopholes. And through one such loophole, a small experimental combat evaluation program, the ghost of the jungle fighter will be reborn, redesigned, renamed. F-5A, Skoshi Tiger. The Air Force won't admit it's the prototype's descendant, but every engineer who worked on the original knows they are building the aircraft that should have entered Vietnam 4 years earlier. And the war is about to prove why it should have. October 1965. Bien Hoa Air Base, South Vietnam. 0540 hours. Monsoon rain lashes the flight line like a curtain of nails. Sheets of water slam against revetments, hiss across aluminum skin, and hammer the helmets of ground crews who move quickly, efficiently, without speaking. The storm makes everything look unfinished, incomplete silhouettes under floodlights, shadows sliced by wind. In the middle of it all sit a dozen aircraft the generals never wanted. Short, narrow, twin-engined, understated, almost anonymous, F-5A freedom fighters. But the men preparing them call the project by its code name, Skoshi Tiger. Little Tiger, a name born from political embarrassment, too small to display pride, too effective to openly acknowledge. Captain Walt Hale, USAF, wipes his visor as he jogs toward aircraft 13096. He's only flown it 3 times, but he already knows he prefers it over the F-100s parked further down the line. The Hun is powerful, loud, impressive. The kind of jet pilots brag about. The F-5? It's the kind of jet you trust. Hale climbs the ladder, rain drumming on his helmet. The cockpit is cramped but thoughtfully arranged, every gauge placed within a movement of instinct. He settles in, straps down, and runs his hand over the visibility arc, a bubble canopy uncannily similar to the one Lou Nelson sat under 6 years earlier in the desert. He doesn't know Nelson's name. He doesn't know the prototype existed, but he is about to fly its descendant into the war it was designed for. A crew chief leans in. Targets in the Iron Triangle. Forward observers say the VC moved in overnight. Real packed jungle. Hale nods. Exactly where this thing belongs. The chief taps the fuselage. Yeah, shame they don't admit that upstairs. Thunder rolls across Bien Hoa. The storm thins just enough for takeoff declarations to begin. Hale watches 2 A-1 Sky Raiders lumber into the sky. Reliable, yes, but slow and aging. The F-5 may be small, but it carries precision that piston aircraft envy. Skoshi Tiger 1, the tower calls. You are cleared for departure. Hale throttles forward. The engines spool into a sharp, eager cry, the same DNA as the sidelined prototype, refined and militarized. The jet accelerates without hesitation, slicing through rainwater sheeting across the runway. Hale lifts off into a sky of boiling cloud, climbing only long enough to clear the worst turbulence before leveling at treetop height. The jungle rises to meet him like a living continent. Huge layers of green, dark river scars, patches of mist suspended between branches thick as arms. Here, speed is death. Here, Agility is survival. He pushes the aircraft into a tight, low-altitude turn. The F-5 responds instantly, banking around a ridge with the confidence of a bird that evolved for this terrain. He whispers, "You were built for this." Ahead, lightning silhouettes a mountain ridge. Hale dips under it, hugging the terrain. Rain pelts the canopy, but visibility remains startlingly good, better than in heavier jets with complex avionics obscured by condensation and glare. A call crackles over the radio. "Skoshi Tiger 1, this is Steelman. We've got VC movement near grid 284. They're regrouping under canopy. We can't get eyes on them." Hale smiles. That's the point. Other jets can't find them. He can. He pulls back slightly, lining up on the coordinates. The jungle below shifts from deep emerald to black-green density, the kind that swallows sound and light. He skims along the treetops until he sees it, a break in the canopy. A cluster of huts, movement, shadows, supplies. This is where the original prototype would have thrived, in the space between seconds, between branches, where a pilot either threads the needle or dies trying. Hale arms his rockets, steadies the jet, dives. The F-5 barely vibrates. Its design absorbs the descent like it was sculpted for this angle. Rain streaks past the canopy as rockets flare downward through the trees. Orange blooms light up the jungle floor. Secondary explosions rip through hidden stockpiles. Bodies scatter. Radio chatter erupts with shock and relief. "Tiger 1, direct hit! VC are breaking! Repeat, breaking!" Hale pulls out of the dive effortlessly, something the F-105 or F-4 could never do this low, this tight, this precise. He climbs back above the valley wall, heart pounding, rain cooling the canopy like refrigerated glass. For a moment, he feels it, that uncanny sensation that he's not flying a new aircraft at all, but something older, something meant for these skies long before the war escalated. A ghost flying beside him, a shadow of a prototype that died too early. He steadies his breath, checks his instruments. More coordinates, more valleys, more calls for close air support. "Skoshi Tiger 1, the radio says, "we have another target for you." "Copy," Hale replies, banking hard. "Send it." As he rolls through the clouds, the jet's compact wings slicing the rain, he wonders, not for the first time, why this aircraft isn't being built by the hundreds, why it isn't the backbone of the air war, why the generals pretend it's just a temporary experiment. But experiments don't win firefights, and today this one just did. The jungle stretches before him again, endless, waiting, and the little tiger dives back into the green exactly as its forgotten ancestors once promised it would. January 1966, Da Nang Air Base. Late afternoon. The sun hangs low, burning a copper path across the runway as F-5s return one by one from another day of missions. Their engines cool with sharp metallic clicks, the smell of hot fuel drifting across the humid air. Ground crews wave marshalling paddles, guiding the compact fighters into narrow revetments that seem designed precisely for their size, as if the base itself understands them better than the generals do. Captain Walt Hale shuts down his jet. Another successful strike, another patrol saved, another jungle pocket cleared where bigger aircraft could never maneuver. He climbs down the ladder, rain-washed tarmac gleaming beneath his boots. His crew chief, Ramirez, meets him with a clipboard. "How'd she fly today?" he asks, though he already knows the answer. Hale grins. "Like she was reading my thoughts." Ramirez nods, satisfied. "You know, sir, it's funny. Everything around here is oversized. Phantoms, thuds, sky raiders. But this little thing, she fits, like the war was built around her." Hale pats the fuselage, the metal still warm beneath his glove. Or she was built for the war. He walks toward the debrief tent, boots splashing through a shallow puddle left by last night's monsoon. Inside, a dozen pilots sit hunched over coffee-stained maps, scribbling coordinates and mission notes. Rain taps on the canvas walls, when not a storm now, just a reminder of the jungle's constant breath. Lieutenant James O'Keefe looks up as Hale enters. "You hear the latest?" he asks. Command's impressed. Hale raises an eyebrow. "About time." O'Keefe smirks. "Yeah, well, don't celebrate yet. They're impressed, but not enough to order more." Hale freezes mid-step. Not ordering more? O'Keefe shrugs, flipping a pencil through his fingers. Politics, budgets, pride, all the usual ghosts. The room falls quiet. A pilot at the back mutters, "We're saving platoons with this thing. They're still calling it an evaluation program?" Another answers, "Because admitting it works means admitting the big jets don't. And nobody up there wants that headline." Hale sits slowly, the weight of the words sinking into him like humidity. Outside, an F-4 Phantom shrieks overhead, drowning out conversation for a full 10 seconds. When the noise fades, Hale says, "Then they're making a mistake. A big one." O'Keefe nods. The kind history remembers. But history remembers quietly, often in footnotes, often in the spaces between decisions made for reasons no soldier would ever understand. The debrief continues, a chorus of coordinates and enemy sightings, but Hale's mind drifts back to the way the F-5 handled the valley this morning, the precision of its turn radius, the way its twin engines forgave mistakes that would have killed him in heavier jets. It wasn't just a tool. It was a solution. One born too early, buried too quickly, resurrected too quietly. He finishes the paperwork, signs his name, and looks out toward the flight line. The little tigers gleam in the fading light, each one a whisper of what could have been an entire fleet. A shape approaches across the tarmac. A visitor. A civilian suit escorted by an airman, heading straight for Hale. The man introduces himself, Jack Shriver, Northrop flight liaison. Hale shakes his hand. "I've read your reports." Shriver smiles faintly. "Then you know we've been fighting for this aircraft longer than you've been flying it." They walk toward the line of F-5s, evening breeze carrying the faint scent of sea salt from the nearby coast. "We heard about your performance today," Shriver says. "Your whole squadron's performance. You're proving what we insisted to the Air Force years ago." Hale glances at him. "That lightweight fighters have a place in real war?" "That they have a place in this war," Shriver corrects. "The one everyone said would never happen. The one everyone claimed would be short." They reach Hale's aircraft. Shriver touches the wingtip almost reverently. "You're flying the grandchild of a machine we built in the 50s, he says. "First time around, they killed it before it ever saw combat." Hale studies him. "Why tell me this now?" Shriver exhales. "Because they're going to kill it again." Silence. Hale feels something cold settle in his chest. "But why?" "It works. You see the results. Everyone sees them." "Results aren't always what the Pentagon buys," Shriver says. "Sometimes they buy narratives. Sometimes they buy factories. Sometimes they buy prestige. And small fighters don't give them that." "No," Shriver says, "but they give you survivability. They give infantry a lifeline. They give the war a chance to be fought with precision instead of brute force." He steps back. "The F-5 won't disappear. Not entirely. Other nations will use it. Dozens of them. It'll become one of the most successful export fighters ever built." "But not ours," Hale says. "Not yours," Shriver confirms. "America will bury it again, just like the prototype before it, too useful to ignore, too humble to embrace." The sun dips below the horizon. A deep orange glow illuminates the row of F-5s, making them look almost mythic. The little tigers standing vigil over a war they were born to fight. Hale stares at them, jaw tight. "Then history's wrong," he says quietly. "This is the fighter we needed first." Shriver nods once. "And the fighter Vietnam deserved." They stand in silence as night settles over Da Nang, the jungle humming in the distance like a vast breathing creature. The little tiger waits in the dark, sharp, understated, undefeated, knowing it arrived too late to save the war, but just in time to prove the Air Force had buried the right jet at the wrong moment. A machine designed for a fight America refused to see until it was already losing it. A jungle fighter resurrected in whispers, flown in shadows, victorious where the others struggled, and forgotten almost the moment it succeeded.